and Guidry goes, let's go look at something that took place 40 years ago. Who cares? Okay, that's political.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world or whenever it is that you're watching. Please welcome to this edition of The Lawyer's Den. On behalf of International Broadcast Media, I'm William Trezevant, your host, and I have the honor and the privilege of first not only welcoming you, our audience, to this very interesting episode of The Lawyer's Den, because the subject is, I think, timely, but also, I think, controversial. But more importantly, my first honor of the hour is to introduce my erstwhile friend, my respected colleague, my deft intellectual foil, and his name is Nick. Now, Nick hails us highly educated with a JD and MBA. I'm not sure in which order he received those, but just to top off the cake, he also received his LLM. And as if that wasn't enough, he is skillful in playing a mean game of chess, having been a two-time state champion chess master in the state of Florida. So where in the world are you, Nick? Are you out there?
I am here, and I was the three-time Florida State chess champion. I was really good when I was younger. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. What's more here nor there is our panel that we have today. Okay. And the thing is, our panel is getting more distinguished all the time. So we should start with introducing this gentleman, who is the Assistant Attorney General for Constitutional Defense for the great state of Utah. Let's bring in Jeff Teichert. Jeff, welcome back to the show.
Like that.
Yeah.
Good to be here, Nick.
He's going to be an SME. And of course, he's also another JD LLM attorney.
Thank you, Nick.
But we have a lot of JD LLM attorneys. We're going to bring this lady in. She has actually received her JD from the University of Denver, her LLM from the University of Denver. Now is smart, moved to Miami. Let's bring in Guidry Stantonai. Guidry, welcome to the show. Do свидания. Or whatever they say in Russian. I have no clue. All right. Now we're going to add more brains to this show because we need that. Counterbalancing Bill Trezevant, we have this gentleman coming in from, actually he received his law degree from The Ohio State University, a master's degree from the University of Alabama, a bachelor's degree from the University of Southern California, and an LLM also, which is a teaching degree for law at NYU. And guess what? He's actually teaching at Georgia College. Let's bring in Adam Lamparero. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
A scholar indeed he is. Okay, now finally we're going to round it out with our street fighter. This gentleman went to Fordham University in New York, which I've been there now. I can see there's a lot of fights in New York City. And then he went off to the State University of New York at Buffalo, shuffled off to Buffalo, and now is moving on to become a district attorney, throwing people in jail in the great state, the city of New York. Let's bring in our street fighter, Fernando Leal.
Hey, Nick, hey, everybody.
Throw the den in jail. And of course, we also have the den master who hails from Fordham also, and the State University of New York at Buffalo. He even likes the Buffalo Bills. He's hiding them now because they lost. Anyway, there they are. Yeah. Our den master, Bill Trezevant. Bill, yeah. What is our topic for today?
Well, it's timely. As our audience knows, and we want to thank all of our listeners and our viewers around the globe, we don't shy away from controversy. And here and around the globe, indeed, this subject has been on everybody's mind for the last year and a half. And that is the issue of vaccinations. Can the government require them? Should they require them? Who should be required to have them? I guess those questions have been swirling around and causing a great number of people a great deal of consternation. Now, there is some precedent and some history here in the United States, although we often think that we're making it up all by ourselves, like we're doing this all from the beginning. But that is not quite true. And for that, our very own from the great state of Utah, our constitutional professor, Jeff Teichert, to brief us and get us started this evening. So with that, and without further ado, Jeff, welcome.
Thank you, Bill, and I'm glad to be on the Lawyer's Den again. And I want to start by saying COVID mandates are directly in my portfolio and my job, and so I don't want to say anything that would create a conflict. However, I can tell you some of the background of this situation. As many know, right around the turn of the century, there was a smallpox epidemic in the United States. Mm-hmm. And there was a case famously decided called Jacobson versus Massachusetts, decided in 1905, a United States Supreme Court case. And it was written by the illustrious Justice John Marshall Harlan, wrote the court's opinion in that case. Mm-hmm. It came from a Massachusetts law stating that a town board of health should require and enforce vaccination of all inhabitants of the town if the board found it necessary. And so there was local control given to local boards of health. It was also made a condition of admission to schools. The risk of the Supreme Court ultimately weighed the various factors and said the risk of injury from the needle and so on was not big enough to weigh against the benefit of the vaccination. However, the court also gave significant deference to the legislature, saying it's really not our job to set pandemic policy. It's that belongs to the legislature, who can weigh out all of the various factors involved. And frankly, in the current debate over these pandemic policies, people cite Jacobson on both sides of the argument, depending on where they're at, because there's fertile ground for both sides. Mm-hmm. Just one final thought. Justice Harlan said this in the opinion. Before closing this opinion, so this is his conclusory remark, we deem it appropriate, in order to prevent misapprehension as to our views, to observe, perhaps to repeat, a thought already sufficiently expressed, namely, that the police power of a state, whether exercised directly by the legislature or by a local body acting under its authority, may be exerted in such circumstances or by regulations so arbitrary and oppressive in particular cases to justify the interference of the courts to prevent wrong and oppression. So I would just pose the question in conclusion, if the legislature has the power to require vaccinations, do they have the power also to forbid them? Or do they have the power to explicitly say that local boards of health or whoever cannot require them? And I think that's an interesting question we might hear more about tonight.
Okay, but we're not done with you yet, Jeff. We are not done with you. Okay. I have this question. Because the 1905 Harlan decision wasn't the end of the story in this case. In fact, the Supreme Court followed the Harlan ruling, the Harlan decision, or Jacobson ruling, in 1922 in a separate case. Isn't that correct?
Quite right, yes.
Okay, and then again, the Supreme Court followed that precedent in 1927. Isn't that correct?
Again, correct.
Okay, and then we found that in the United States by 1930, in fact, 24 states, based on following the Supreme Court decisions of 05, or 1905, 1922, and 1927, had in fact put in place far more extreme measures under that authorization. They in fact allowed for mandatory medical procedures. In those cases, 24 states had laws requiring mandatory sterilization under the Jacobson doctrine. Isn't that correct, Jeff?
Yes.
Okay. However, there was a bit of a twist, because I really want to get this correct for our audience. There was a bit of a twist. I think it was Gorsuch earlier this year that made a decision in the Supreme Court case that said that maybe Jacobson was no longer applicable. Can you tell us about that? Oh, sorry.
Justice Gorsuch called it into question. Now he's he's called a number of cases into question, including Chevron, which he has yet to overrule. I can't read the tea leaves as to whether the Supreme Court would follow Jacobson in the current situation. I suspect they might, given that it has been upheld on a couple of different occasions, as you pointed out.
Okay. So, Jeff, I guess just to kind of wind this up to get our audience ready for the scrum that I expect us to have, because Jeff, all these LLMs cooped up in a room, they get really cranky. So to sum it up, Jacobson is still the law of the land, 1, 2. Gorsuch has expressed a dissenting opinion, but we don't know where it's going to go, at least in terms of the future. So right now, the law as it currently stands is that there should be no barrier to authorities requiring vaccinations. Is my understanding correct, Jeff?
So suggest that the political question doctrine bears on this, and that was decided in Baker versus Carr. But the idea is that there are some questions that are reserved directly to the political branches of government, and many people are arguing vociferously that this is one of those kinds of questions that the courts can't step in on.
Okay.
Now, there's also a prudential element of that doctrine, which means the courts will refuse to wade in even when they could if they determine that it isn't really prudent for the courts to get involved, because it's such a big question of public policy or something. The people's elected representatives should really be the ones deciding it. And I think that's going to play in this whole debate too.
Okay, well, there we have it. Our audience, we're all set up now. Let's get to the rest of our panel. Let us go through, and I am thinking of the number one, at least proponent of freedom, and it's a close call, but I'm going to go with Adam and then Fernando. So, Adam, where are you? There you are, Adam. Adam, I mean, you have a bigger flag, I think, than I do behind me, and so Jeff is saying that we can require it. You're saying what, the government shouldn't require it, or what, Adam?
I'm saying that Jacobson versus Massachusetts is irrelevant. It only applies to the power of states to require vaccinations. It does not apply to the federal government's power to do that. And there is no precedent saying the federal government has the power to do what Joe Biden is seeking to do. What they're trying to do is to use an agency, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, to order that private employers should require their employees to get vaccinated because the coronavirus is a grave danger and it's necessary to require vaccinations. Well, that's a bunch of nonsense. For 99% of the population, the coronavirus is no threat at all. The survival rate is 99.4%. People are already vaccinated. This is a government overreach. Jacobson is irrelevant. And it's time that we move beyond the coronavirus because it was never the threat that it was. And we shut down the economy and destroyed people's lives for nothing.
Okay. Fernando, you're up. Fernando, your thoughts given what Adam said based on Jeff's briefing?
Right, this is kind of tough because I agree with a couple of things that Adam says, but not all of them. So I'm going to not mention the stuff I agree with and just go straight for what I don't agree with.
Okay.
What we are seeing here with all these anti-vaxxers is the failure of the public school system in action. They don't understand science. They don't understand how vaccines work. They don't understand how viruses are transmitted. The argument that 95% survive, yeah, that's true, but that means that 5% are sick in the hospital or dying, overrunning the system. The issue becomes that as long as you keep the virus virulent, it continues to change and mutate into the Delta and the Mu and all these other forms of the virus. What the vaccine does is that it helps tamp down the virus and take away its virility, its ability to kill, its ability to mutate. You know, in that Jacobson decision, there's a great sentence that says, even liberty itself, the greatest of all rights, is not unrestricted license to act according to one's own will. It's only freedom from restraint under conditions essential to the equal enjoyment of the same right by others. It is then liberty regulated by law. And we have to regulate, because we have a lot of dummies running around this country who don't understand anything, who want to continue to spread the virus. And you see them get it, they show up in the hospital and then like, oh man, I have the vaccine. People go get the vaccine. Well, at least we're thinning out the herd of idiots.
Okay. All right. No. We're gonna go. We got to get Guidry and Nick on this one. So, Guidry, we have the Defenders of Freedom in Adam, who says it's just a bunch of hootenanny nonsense. We've got Fernando saying, "Hey, listen, we maybe we're thinning out the herd, but even in a compassionate way, Guidry, just hear this. I'm using compassionate with Fernando. Even in a compassionate way, Fernando's saying that we shouldn't be thinning out the herd because we ought to be exercising our authority. What are your thoughts on this? Is it a matter of freedom? Should we operate under the law? Do we have the authority to mandate vaccination? Supreme Court says we do. Guidry?
Okay, so here we'll agree with both, with Adam and Fernando. I agree with Adam that president does have, in fact, executive authority to regulate, to order vaccinations in a federal workforce area. He can use his spending power through Medicaid and Medicare to order vaccination and regulate it. And as Adam mentioned, also Safety Act and Hazardous Safety Act. So through those, president can regulate it. And also I will agree with Fernando, because Fernando is saying, hey, but we also have personal liberties and so on, and we have masses that might not be knowledgeable and really understanding of the better public good, and that necessity to really take care of the better group of people, of the United States people. But I think here we are missing one very important point, which is exemptions. We really do have to acknowledge religious, personal choice, medical exemptions. And when it comes to Jacobson versus Massachusetts case, one thing needs to be mentioned, that Jacobson never provided to the court any of the medical opinion or document indicating that he did in fact had medical condition. So there, that case also misses the main point. I think exemptions are important because in United States, we incredibly value individual autonomy. And in order to preserve the integrity of any kind of public system or public program that president is trying to incorporate and introduce in our public society and fabric, we really do have to communicate and acknowledge that not one size fits all, especially in the United States.
Okay, Nick, I mean, can we bring everybody up? Because this is our round robin now. Nick, seriously, I mean, look, is it freedom of choice and let them thin themselves out, as Fernando's arguing? Is it that, as I would suggest, let's take care of these people in spite of themselves, drag themselves kicking and screaming in the 21st century? Nick, what is going on?
Well, it was extremely hard. I need to lose my hearing, Bill, because it was really hard to listen to guys like Adam. First of all, I thought, who's going to be dumb enough on this panel to actually try to support the anti-vaxxer arguments by downplaying the amount of people that actually died? Then Adam steps up and goes, well, only 0.5% died. Adam, it was 700,000 people. And I know he's not on here to defend himself, which is perfect for me. 700,000 people died, Adam. More than the total amount of the Civil War, which is our biggest death rate. But of course, since you're in Midgeville, Georgia, in the middle of bloody nowhere, and you're stuck with all this red drippings all over you, you don't get the fact how deadly this virus is. And it's getting even worse because of the Delta variant. So you can take the number here, and if we don't do anything and we're not serious about it, it goes off the bloody charts, which we're seeing right now. And so Jacobson was very well decided, and I hope they put the hammer down, I would, to make sure people either get vaccinated or they go crawl in a hole. Now you can go ahead and bring everybody back.
Nick, I just want to flesh out one point, and that's this whole issue that's 94.4 whatever percent that Adam's going to be hugging for the rest of the show. And that is this. Isn't it true that it's only the 94 or 95% survival rate because there are those that in fact took the vaccine, and that's why we're seeing the survival rate at that rate at the 94% level?
I mean, it could be, but we got to look at the raw numbers. How many people actually died, Bill? Over 700,000. What are the hospitals like with these anti-vaxxers in Idaho, Montana, Alaska? They're all dying, and the hospitals are full because these young people that are Adam's age believe that they're not subject to, they're totally immune, and they're not. The new Delta variant has just proven that we can get you too. The virus doesn't care about age today. It did when they first got started, but the variant has changed. Now, with that, the Supreme Court wisely put in a decision like Jacobson that can force people to take the vaccine. And I totally believe that, because there's one thing I do believe that Fernandez believes in, is that the people are not really smart enough to make the decision themselves. They're not educated in biology, virology. I don't think they've ever opened a medical book or the Lancet, which I just read before here, coming in here. And so they're incapable, unfortunately, of making the decision themselves.
Okay, Nick,
Hammer down, baby.
if we can bring everybody up, because I want to continue to you, but I want to.
Wait a second. I'm not allowed to respond to this diatribe.
Are you throwing a challenge?
I'm throwing a red flag right now against the entire panel except for Jeff.
Okay, Adam, you have the floor.
Now, look, like you said, Nick may be a 3-time state champion at checkers, but his opinion is completely wrong, because the coronavirus deaths are hopelessly inflated. The definition of a COVID-related death is so inflated that gunshot victims, people who committed suicide, and people who were hit by a train were called COVID deaths. And I'm calling BS. Number 2, it's funny how Fernando and Guidry, their first response is to regulate, and take away your liberty. Oh, but when you bring up abortion, Guidry screams, oh, it's my body, get the federal government out of my life. All they want to do is take away your liberty and regulate. And the fact is they can't do it. Jacobson is irrelevant because the federal government has no power to order private employers to require vaccines. That is an affront to liberty. That's an affront to freedom and autonomy. The fact remains, this coronavirus and the way we handled this was a disgrace. The deaths have been inflated. For the vast majority of the population, it causes you the sniffles. So, Fernando, if you want a tissue box, I'd be happy to send you one. We need to get back to a normal life where the economy is strong and people are free.
Okay, Jeff, and then I'm coming to you, Guidry. Jeff, I want to ask you. How do we make sense of this on a policy matter? I mean, because clearly there's a back and forth and a divide. I want to leave the law alone for a moment, because we're clearly, as you so eloquently put it at the beginning, we're clearly in this area of public policy, and whether it's the federal or the state level. Jeff, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I would say I think Adam is correct, at least in part. I don't believe the Jacobson decision stands for the idea that the federal government can come in under OSHA or some other statute and do this. It doesn't mean it can't, but I don't believe that the case stands for that proposition. I would also, I'll refrain from talking about whether the executive can do it, as Guidry talked about, within the realm of executive branch employees. Again, that's likely or very well could end up in my portfolio, and I don't want to talk about that. But I also think it's important to recognize, looking at Jacobson, that what it really did, the Jacobson case, was it upheld a process. It didn't necessarily uphold vaccination or not. It upheld the Massachusetts statute that allowed local health departments to make the decision. They could decide to make people get vaccinated or not to. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest arguments going forward, is not necessarily should we vaccinate or shouldn't we, although that's part of it, but who makes the decision? What is the best institution to balance the competing policy objectives, whether it's the personal freedom that was talked about, or whether it's, maximum protection from COVID. And I think that's where the policy debate really centers.
Okay, fantastic. Now, Guidry, I'm coming to you, and I have some very specific questions based on this prior answer. I understand that you were well aware of the importance of these exceptions, religious and those that you advocated for. But I want to go through a specific series, and then I'm coming to the rest of the panel. I'm going to come to you, Fernando, next, and that is, Guidry, listen, for those populations that we are completely in charge of, that can't really make a decision on their own and can't exercise necessarily their free will because, for example, they're incarcerated. Can't we mandate vaccinations for those people that are currently incarcerated because they are in our custody, and we as a society have a responsibility for their health and welfare regardless of their status? Didn't they give up those rights like they gave up the right to vote when they were convicted of a crime? So can't we vaccinate them, yes or no, Guidry?
My answer would be no, but dealing in immigration and having clients who have been detained in ICE custody during the COVID pandemic, that question came up on multiple occasions. And family members of the detained people, of the immigrants who tried to cross illegally, were very concerned when on multiple occasions their family members who were detained were actually vaccinated without their consent. And ICE acts a little bit different than our prison structure, because our prisoners are U.S. citizens. They have a different rights. In either way, I still think, and I firmly believe by it, that we cannot force something on people wholeheartedly. I do believe in exemptions. They have to be well articulated exemptions. It cannot be just, I don't feel like it. But I think that here we can actually overcome it by educating people, by communicating to people, by being more transparent. Because
So condescending. You think you know better than everybody else. Typical liberal.
No. But Adam, you're talking about people like we were monkeys, that we are incapable to.
No, you're talking about people like they're monkeys and like they're stupid.
No, Adam, you cannot just strike off people just because they would not understand. And in fact, I'm very disappointed with your arguments, because you're talking about me being pro-regulation when I'm talking that Jacobson was about plenary police state power. We are talking about legislature,
at the state level.
organisms that you were activating, that we elect, that actually set those rules. So Adam, you actually jumping from one to another, where I think we're really in agreement. We both agree that state legislature that was decided in Jacobson is empowered by the people who elected them to select whether to make those mandatory vaccinations. But I am okay with those as long as there are exemptions.
Okay, but Guidry, you don't get off that easy. I started with the prisoners, okay? But, I mean, when it comes to immigrants, that's an entirely different story. And I wanted to get your position on prisoners first, but you're right, and thank you for bringing up immigrants. I mean, they're coming into our country. They want the benefits, they want asylum, and yet they're not U.S. citizens yet. And shouldn't it be, can't we as a country responsibly make that a requirement, just like we make all the other requirements of entry into the United States? Because I just want to point out, Guidry, it seems to me the argument,
yes.
Nick, I'm coming to you next, but Guidry, if we have shut down all of our borders, and all these other countries have shut down their borders, Austria, New Zealand, Europe, and made vaccinations mandatory, why can't we make it mandatory for immigrants? Because it seems to me that that's unreasonable. Guidry, and then Nick.
No, I agree with you, Bill. And in fact, right now, since middle of October, people who are in United States eligible to become United States citizens have to have a mandatory COVID-19 vaccination. But I still believe that there is a choice. If someone was detained in United States custody and doesn't want to take this COVID vaccination, the person has a choice to leave the country and go back to their country or another closer country that they are capable of going in. I really don't think that when I see such a forced procedure on people who are detained, it troubles me, because automatically I think about forced sterilizations, I think about other more egregious procedures, but I don't understand the public danger that you are talking about, and for me right now it is very difficult to really take strong stand on it.
Okay, Nick, and then Fernando. But Nick, prisoners, immigrants, and Fernando, prisoners and immigrants, do we have a right? I mean, are you listening to Adam or me or Guidry? Nick?
Absolutely not. In other words, the thing is, to me, this makes the decision real simple. If an immigrant comes across the border and said, I'm not willing to take a vaccination, then we don't even need to do anything else except to put them on the next plane out the door, and don't even bother to process them or anything like that. If somebody's in prison and they're under my care, custody, and control, they get vaccinated. They do not have a choice. And as an owner of a company, and also a homeowner, when people walk through my door, and they do, and I say, "Are you vaccinated?" Nope. I said, "Good. You're not getting this job. You're fired. Out the door you go." If an employee does the same thing, "You're not vaccinated?" No problem. You're fired. Out the door you go. That's the way we can do it. And that's my freedom as the owner of my company. Please, Adam, don't step on
You sound
my
like
freedom.
the Shah of Iran.
Don't step on my freedom with your snot, please.
Okay, Fernando.
Thank you.
Fernando, you're up.
I agree with Nick wholeheartedly. The truth of the matter is, if you're in prison, your confinement is that you're on top of each other. There is no 6-foot rule in prison. Jail cells are not 6 feet apart. So this disease spreads, it spreads really fast. So therefore, yes, you need to start vaccinating, because you're going to get, if one guy gets it, you're going to get most of the prison to get it. You're going to get most of the guards to get it. Most of the people are going to be out. In terms of immigrants, yes, once upon a time to get into this country, you needed to have the TB test, tuberculosis test, and you needed to get inoculated. It has existed since forever. If you look at people that came to this country in the 60s and before, you'll see the TB test marking on their arm. So to say that it shouldn't be done is ridiculous. And I want to address something that Adam brings up about my body, my right. You dummy. You're messing up. It is your body, your right, when it doesn't infringe on somebody else and doesn't hurt somebody else. In this instance, your body, your right, can kill me or Bill or Guidry or someone else. So yeah, you don't have that. The fact is, if you read the decision, that I know you're down in Georgia, and as a professor, you only read the stuff you want to read. It says your right to liberty is not unfettered. It is a right pursuant to law. Laws govern, not nilly-willy, whatever you want to do. So to this argument that my body, my right, I can see Georgia and those toothless yahoos down there are having an effect on you.
Okay, no, hang on, Fernando, because you're not done. But Adam, I'm coming to you, so please hold your horses, my friend. Yeah, I'm relying on your better angels.
Hey, Fernando, do you want that tissue box FedEx to you?
Okay, Adam.
In terms of the tissue box, buddy, I had coronavirus, and I was in the hospital. I was in the hospital with a cannula, air tube up my nose. I know you don't know what that is. That's an oxygen tube, because you don't know anything since you don't practice. So I was in the hospital for a week. Unlike you, who would have crawled up into a ball and sucked your thumb and called your mommy, I actually fought and survived.
Okay, all right. Well, listen. Before I get to you, Adam, Fernando, this is my last question. It's a bit of a twist.
Yeah.
Okay, well, hang on. It's a bit of a twist. And then, Adam, I'm coming to you to answer all three of these parts. Fernando, we understand your position on prisoners and immigrants. Now, here's the tricky part. What about first responders? And let me just set this up. Very early on, the first responders were out there doing the heroes' work, and we all applauded them, and rightfully so. They put their lives on the line. Now we have a vaccine, and now we have first responders, the very people who were crying out in the beginning saying, we need it first, and we all agreed we were behind them and support their work. But now we have a certain segment of first responders refusing to get the vaccines. Why can't we make it mandatory for them? Because indeed, isn't it really in their best interest, in spite of themselves, to get the vaccine? What's your position on first responders, Fernando? And then, Adam, I'm coming to you for all three of these. Fernando.
Sorry, Bill. My position on first responders is that should be mandatory. And if they don't want to take it, yeah, they should be fired, because I don't want some dummy coming in to pick me up and take me to a hospital to get another dummy who doesn't know what they're doing. It baffles my mind how people even got through the training. I come from a family that has first responders. As a matter of fact, one of the first responders family was in the hospital for 50 days, suffered 2 strokes, and he came out and he still is having difficulties speaking. He got corona while being in the firehouse. He actually lived, which he wasn't supposed to. So it should be mandatory for them. And if they don't want to take it, you're out.
Okay, I got it. Now, Adam, you're up. Prisoners, immigrants, and first responders. Why can't we make that mandatory? Adam?
Because we live in a free society and because the coronavirus is not a threat to the vast majority of the population. I want the audience to really consider this. Look at what Guidry and Fernando are doing, calling the American public dummies, insulting the American public, seeking to control you and regulate you because they think they know better. If that's a society you want to live in, move to Iran or move to North Korea. The fact is, if you want to be educated, the coronavirus is no threat whatsoever to the vast majority of the population. For young people, for people of the middle ages with no comorbidities, it is no threat whatsoever. And that's why a vaccine requirement is so ridiculous. You are forcing people to take a vaccine when a virus is no threat to them and you are impinging upon their liberty. And the reason that Guidry and Fernando so ineloquently revealed is they think you're stupid.
Okay.
That's not democracy. That's not real. They both should be ashamed of themselves. And Fernando, when you get those tissues, you may not need them because I guarantee you'll be asymptomatic if you get the virus.
Okay, we're great there. Jeff, I'm turning to you, but I want to twist this.
I want to throw a flag
Okay,
to respond to something that Adam said.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Sure you do.
To sit here and claim that we live in an unregulated society shows why you're teaching at college, and it shows why you came out of Georgia. The fact is that there is a regulation for every single thing we do in our society. Based on your theory that we shouldn't be regulated and we have regulations, then hey, why don't you just go run around naked and pee all over the place?
I'm saying this regulation is wrong.
But there's a regulation for everything. No, not. You said it. You just now because, as all law professors do, now you're trying to twist it around and get out of it because you got pinned. The fact of the matter is, you live in a regulated society, whether you like it or not. And now we need a regulation because there are a lot of dummies walking around. I'm not ashamed to say it, and I'm not scared to say it.
Okay, nope, that's okay.
You see that, audience?
No, you've got that, Jeff. I want to twist this a bit, and this is a question directly for you, and I really want to rely on your ability to process over time the implications. Now, if the Supreme Court were to say overturn Jacobson, wouldn't that have an effect on a much broader level? Like, for example, the requirements for kids at school to have either the polio vaccination or any of the other vaccinations that we normally require, either for school or for traveling abroad. I mean, Jeff, at a certain level, even as a commoner without an LLM, someone like myself, the state can require our animals to be vaccinated before we even put them into, a boarding thing. So if my dog has to be vaccinated, I'm just not getting it. And wouldn't it just upset the apple cart? Because once you take care of Jacobson, then all the other requirements and state authority goes out the window. Jeff, how are you looking at the implications of an overturn?
Well, I think it depends on the basis upon which it's overturned and what the opinion says. It could be, distinguished on the grounds that Adam suggested earlier. The court could say, well, this doesn't apply because we're going to now talk about whether the federal government has the authority to interfere with state police powers on this subject. So there could be a variety of different ways this could go. Would it have impact on how COVID policy gets made and what that turns out to look like? It could. But I think whether or not Jacobson is reversed or whether it's distinguished or whether it's extended in some fashion, the court could do a lot of different things with that.
Okay. Nick, I'm still unsure. And Nick, this is a very specific question for you. Do you play chess or checkers?
Yeah, he made an allusion to the fact that I am the 3-time Florida State chess champion and a USCF master, and I'm used to dealing with dummies like him. But let me tell you something. When you play chess at a top level, you look to see how grandmasters play, top masters play. You don't look at the average Joe, which he's purporting to say, let's support the decision of the average Joe. Nobody in competitive chess looks at the average Joe.
Look, I'm
'cause
good
the
at
average
Connect Four
Joe
too.
sucks at chess. I'm sorry, Adam. If the thing is, I will beat them all the time. It won't
Okay.
even be close. So when it comes to something like this, I look for the grandmasters, the subject matter experts. I don't look at the average Joe. So no, I do not support the average Joe in my medical decisions. Go ahead, go see average Joe for your medical decisions. I won't do that.
The
And I don't
ego of the
support
top
average
1%.
Joe in chess either because they're horrible at it.
Okay, but Nick, let me ask you this, because we got your position on prisoners and immigrants. What about first responders?
Oh, same thing. Fire them. In other words, the thing is, the first responders, if they don't take the vaccine, fired, they're out. And a recent stat that just came down: more police officers today die of COVID-19 than anything else because they don't have this to do it. Now, of course, we've gone over that famous case that said if your IQ is too high, you can't become a police officer. That was, remember the City of New London case.
Well,
Okay.
explain it.
And so the thing is, if your IQ is over 127, what happened is the City of New London fired him. And they go, how could you do that? This was upheld by our court system. Well, they're too smart to be a police officer. So go put that in your bailiwick.
Can I throw a flag here?
Okay, this is your second and final flag, and then Gatry, I'm coming to you. Go ahead, Adam. You threw
Just briefly, I want the audience to understand this. Nick wants to get you fired. Gatry wants to put you in chains, and Fernando wants to call you a dummy. If you think that that's consistent with freedom, then I suggest you move to Pyongyang. This is a disgrace. The overreaction of the coronavirus was a disgrace, and these people want to control you. They think you're stupid. They don't respect your freedom. I believe in the people. I believe in democracy. They don't.
Okay. Well, with that having been said, Gatry, can you cast some sunshine on this from that great state of Florida that you live in? Is it chains? I mean, are they gold chains? Are they silver chains? Are they big loops, little loops? Gatry, what kind of chains are you going to be giving people?
Invisible chains, educating, communicating, trying to come to the agreement and being transparent. I think that's all what we need. I don't want to repeat myself, but I think, we are comparing COVID-19 vaccination to smallpox, polio, vaccines that have been existed for decades. We talk about safety. People need to feel safe. Yes, we have vaccine that is FDA approved, and we just need to keep kind of and telling them what's happening, where we are going. I've read very interesting statistic that the people who have vaccine and the people who are not. So we have this big loop. So the people who are least educated don't have this vaccine, and then we go to this loop. The majority of people who have like a lot of education, 3 degrees, 2 degrees. And then we finish the loop with like the smallest, again, the same percentage of very, very intelligent people, like multiple PhDs and probably chess wins and so on.
What an elitist you are.
My point is that the same amount of people do not vaccinate, who are not vaccinated are the people who are least educated and people who are the most educated. And then we have majority of the rest, So the point is that we cannot categorize this problem as, based on the financial situation, education level. It's really societal thing, and we need to talk more about it, and we need to understand each other. I hate how divided we are by it, but it is an issue. We do have COVID-19. We cannot pretend that it does not exist, and we're just trying to figure out what next to worry about, So hopefully we will get to the solution in a nicer way. And again, I'm pro exemptions too.
Okay, no, I hear you. Now, Fernando, Gatry raises a very interesting point. And Fernando, I'm coming to you, but then I'm coming to you next, Jeff. Fernando, how do we build a bridge?
We build a
this
bridge on the body of the dead dummies that didn't get the vaccine. The truth of the matter is that you cannot reason with most of these people that do not want to be vaccinated. Most of them are part of the Christian Taliban, and they refuse. They start citing God. They start saying that mRNA is gene manipulation. They don't even understand what mRNA is, and they're saying it's gene manipulation. They don't understand that it's the delivery system of the protein into your body to help you build up immunity. It's be at a point where the vaccinations, people are going to have to be forced to be vaccinated to get us up to the 70 and 80%. Because the truth of the matter is that there are individuals in our society that will never be able to be vaccinated for different reasons, blood conditions, age, so on and so forth. It just won't happen. We have to protect them. You're not going to build herd immunity that everybody keeps talking about without the vaccine and without killing its virility. So you're not going to be able to educate these people. It just isn't going to happen. Just listen to Adam.
Okay. No.
There you go.
You should be vaccinated against ignorance.
Okay. Well, when we come up
I wish
with
there was such a vaccine.
Stop it, Nick.
Jeff, how do we build bridges? I mean, away, and I'm not sure if Fernando's way is the appropriate way, but how do we build?
Well, I think an interesting divide that exists on this is whatever people think about taking the vaccine or not taking it. We're seeing this fall football stadiums full of spectators going to college football games. My team's 5-0, but by the way, I'm happy about that. But
unlike Miami,
I think what this indicates is that
was a low shot.
That our society has had it up to here with COVID restrictions. Now, I'm not saying they're right or wrong. I'm saying I think that's what the vast majority of the public thinks. They don't want the COVID restrictions anymore. So the question then is, does popular will prevail, even though that may result in additional deaths, or do we have a government by experts who may be able to tell us how to get out of a pandemic, but won't necessarily weigh all of the other considerations? It's a debate that's going on now. How do you bridge the gap between those two? I think Guidry's right on that. It's education. You give people information.
Okay. Well, now, Nick, because you have a very strong position, and I'm going to ask you something very difficult. How do we build a bridge, Nick?
I'm not interested in building a bridge. If you want to go build a bridge, go talk to Adam, and you guys can go build bridges together. I could care bloody less. Okay. The thing is, it's like sitting there and trying to educate it. You've never played competitive tournament chess and work with extremely weak players, which are probably all Adam's students. And the thing is, no matter how much you teach them, they can't bloody learn anything. So what you do is you tell them, these are the moves you're going to make, period, the end, because that's what you got to do. So I agree, oddly enough, with Fernando. You tell them what to do. And what you never do is let some low-rated player go tell a grandmaster how to play a game. You will lose all the time. What Adam wants to take you down, the road to perdition, which is to have all the little weak players make the decision, where the strong grandmaster, we're going to ignore him. And that is wrong today. It'll be wrong 500 years from now, and it's wrong in the next decade.
Nick, you're not an expert just because you're good at Connect Four.
Okay. All right. Well,
I'm good at everything, but
Guidry,
we'll have to get to that later.
Guidry, I have a slightly different question for you now as I move forward, and that is this: is that it seems to me unusual, at least here in the United States, that some issues that are controversial, various factions, depending on what side they are, they can fast track it straight to the Supreme Court. But this issue of whether or not we are actually going to operate under the Jacobson precedent is being ignored. I mean, anybody say that is against mandatory vaccinations, they could actually just file a claim or file a court case and be coordinated and speed it right up to the Supreme Court, just like they've done with abortion cases, just like they've done with voting rights cases, just like they've done with everything else. But in today's society, this seems to be one issue that the opposing side does not want to take to the court. What reasons do you ascribe to that, if any? And would you adopt that kind of legal strategy to finally clear this up, Guidry?
Well, I think when it comes to a medical pandemic, it definitely gets more urgency and more extremity. We are talking about minors, we're talking about children, we're talking about loved ones. I think the country.
Why not fast track? Why not fast track it? Why not have somebody file their claim and then we fast track it straight to the Supreme Court so that we get an answer? I mean, we've been living with it for 2 years. Is that a strategy you would endorse?
I don't think that the answer would be against the mandatory vaccination. I don't think that the public would, that the Supreme Justices would give that answer. So I think my opinion, that would be not the thing to do.
Okay.
I do think that exemptions could be something, talked about, but it's just when it comes to public safety, even when we are not sure about the the vaccine's long-term effects, there is an FDA approval. And also we have numbers. We have huge, high numbers of the people, that we lost. And it doesn't matter that it might be, some mix of different causes of death. The numbers talk for themselves. And I have a bee running around, so I'm really trying to focus right now.
Well, I mean, Deidre, between being photobombed at the airport and bees tonight, I mean, everybody loves you. But Fernando, I'm coming to you, and then Adam, I'm coming to you. But Fernando, seriously, every single time, and this is another one of these politicized kinds of arguments, every single time there's a politicization of these arguments, one side goes directly to court and they fast track it to the Supreme Court, claiming this is the best way to go. We see politicians out front doing it and getting all kinds of ink with the New York Post, with front page, back page, Wall Street Journal, etc. Fernando, why aren't they doing it now, and should they be doing it? Shouldn't we just get an answer out of this? Fernando?
Actually, they have done it. In New York City, there is a mandate by the mayor that city employees, particularly teachers, have to be vaccinated. They went to court. They lost, and they did try to fast track it and put it on the emergency docket. And Sotomayor wrote the majority opinion denying their emergency application. So, as of right now, that mandate stands, and they have to get vaccinated. And as of today, I think today I saw a headline in the Daily News where I think it's like 97% are vaccinated anyway without the mandate. And they've let, the 3%, they're out of jobs.
I know, but Fernando, thank you, because I received exactly what I needed while I turned my attention to my erstwhile friend, Adam. Adam, I am putting you squarely on the hot seat on this one, and that is this. I think your side is scared of a direct legal challenge, 1, 2. And that's what I think, because they haven't filed it. I mean, it took liberals in New York City to go up to the courts. But more importantly, your conservative Supreme Court has denied certiorari, which is Latin for they won't hear the case. They don't even want to decide the case. And that's your conservative Supreme Court, Adam. How do you defend your conservative Supreme Court ducking this very question? Because they know what the answer is, and that mandatory vaccinations are in fact allowable under the Supreme Court. Adam, what's your answer?
Because they're scared and they don't want to get into the political fray because they're concerned about their institutional legitimacy. But the underlying issue here is everybody wants everybody to be safe. One life being lost is too much. The question is, should we rely upon the heavy hand of government to control its citizens? Deidre wants to put you in chains, okay? Fernando thinks you're stupid, okay? And Nick, just because he's an expert at a Ouija board, is in no position to be telling you what you should and should not do. I believe in the people. I believe in freedom, and I believe they can make informed choices for their well-being. That's democracy, that's America, that's liberty, and that's what I support.
Okay, well, with that, Adam, lady and gentlemen, we are moving into our lightning round as we anticipate the landing of this plane, and I swear do not crash it. But I'm going to go around the horn. First, Jeff, I'm going to start with you. You've heard what's gone on today, and I know that you're in a unique position currently, and so I don't want you to endanger any of that. But that allows you to really take a bird's eye view, a 50,000-foot level. Having heard today's conversation and the arguments back and forth, what are your thoughts, Jeff, about how we ought to think about this moving forward?
Just alluded to, as Bill just alluded to, of course, I mean, I have mask mandates on my desk right now, and I don't want to get into vaccine mandates because the issues are so related, and who knows whether that might end up on my desk here soon. But what I will say is that under Jacobson, the Supreme Court approved a process, and the question that I have then is, if this somehow makes it to the Supreme Court, what will the Supreme Court do? Will it think less in terms of vaccine mandates or not, and think about the process they set up for making the decision? Because that is where I think the fundamental constitutional question is going to be. Not necessarily can they impose mandates or can they not, but who can do it, and what's the process, and is it constitutional?
Okay, Deidre.
Just to continue to what Jeff said, Jacobson did not end up having a vaccination. In fact, he lost the case. He paid $5 fine. Today it would have been $140, $150 fine, and he lived 20 plus years thereafter. The question is that here right now, I think that there is going to decision to be made if we're going to move this direction. Unfortunately, at this point, the fine that the people who are not sure, who don't feel safe to get vaccination face, it's not $5 or $140. It's losing their job or livelihood. So yet we have this pandemic on our hands, and we need to come to the solution, to the best solution. In my opinion, to reach that 70-80% that we need to reach the safer state of the public better being, better education, transparency, communication could be helpful. And then having a system in place that could help to monitor the people who get vaccinated in order to reach those numbers and then move forward.
I'm sure you do want to monitor people.
Okay, no, Adam, you're next. Go right ahead, young man. Your thoughts as we land this plane. Go ahead.
I have absolutely nothing left to say. They've made their case for me.
Okay, Fernando, I think he's ceded the floor to you.
Yeah. Since Adam is going to believe in the people, Adam will be dead soon. So we really won't have to hear any more of his nonsense. Guidry brings up a good point that Jacobson ended up paying the fine. He didn't get vaccinated. But with Jacobson, he had already been vaccinated at the age of 6. So in essence, what he was going to be getting was a booster shot, because the law called for both either vaccination or a booster if you had been given a smallpox in 1887. So maybe it turns out that people didn't need the booster shot, but nobody studied them, so we'll never know. The fact is that vaccines work. And the fact is sometimes people just won't take them because they just are too dumb to understand what's going on. And no matter how much information you put out there, what they'll tell you is that they did their own research. So they went to InfoWars or the National Enquirer or some other junk science magazine to look up what supports their position.
Or Bill de Blasio
undergoing gene manipulation, that they're putting all these poisons in your body, yet these are the same people that go to McDonald's and eat 30 chicken nuggets and have a giant gallon of Coke. But hey, it's the vaccine. The vaccine is the poison. It isn't the McDonald's. It isn't the fact that you're 500 pounds from eating the McDonald's and you're slopping your way up and down the road. No, the vaccine's the poison. I mean, there's going to have to be a mandate to do it. I do agree that when it comes to the federal government, we don't know the answer, because really the case does speak to state power and state police power. But if I'm remembering back in the cockles of my mind somewhere, I think the Constitution also grants police powers to the federal government to protect the citizens for health, safety, welfare, and the like. So it's possible that under those same prongs, Jacobson could be expanded in a limited fashion for the federal government.
Okay, that having been said, and thank you, look, to my colleagues, this is every single conversation is interesting, and I particularly delightful and proud of this one, and I'll tell you why. These represent the actual conversations that are going around that people refuse to or are too scared to discuss. And yet here we have the courage. And we're doing it in such a delightful way. I've learned about checkers and chess and bocce ball and chains and gold and such. But with that having been said, I do hope that at least for our audience, you found at least our discourse interesting. Because it is a complicated subject. It's one that we're not getting out of anytime soon. Now, with that having been said, Nick, as always, I'd like your concluding thoughts first. And then please, Nick, will you land this plane safely?
Yeah, we're going to try to. And speaking about airplanes, as I said, I just got back from Italy. And on Italy, here to go there on the airplane and come back here, they required me to wear a mask, which I hated. It was required. They required me to take a COVID vaccine, which I hated, but I took it anyway. And then worst to worst, I had to take the stuff up my nose as they tested me before I got on the plane.
Wow.
So I asked the stewardess, I said, this is really torture for me to have to wear the mask, get vaccinated, get poked. I said, is there any other choice that I could have if I want to go to Italy? Said, no, there is no choice. But if you don't like it, you should become a law professor in Midgeville, Georgia, and just go teach people. And I said, no, that's hell. I won't do that. And with that, I had a great time in Italy and had a great time here on the Lawyer's Den. I guess we'll see everybody tomorrow on Lawyer's Den. Yeah, throw your red flag now, Adam. Unfortunately, it's over, as they would say. And Guidry goes, let's go look at something that took place 40 years ago. Who cares? Okay, that's political.